Hello everyone. Today's topic is applied dialectology. And applied dialectology is what it sounds like in its broadest possible sense. It's using findings from dialectology and other language variation research to make a difference in areas that go beyond the reasons why linguists use dialectology in their own research. So, first question one might ask is, why do this at all? And Bill above cited a couple of reasons. There's one that he called the principle of error correction, which is this: if scientists have data which show that a widespread idea or social practice is misguided, then they have a responsibility to make people aware of this. And this applies to any academic discipline, really, not just people that would be happy to be referred to as scientists. And the next one is the principle of debt incurred, which applies very especially to social sciences, anything that involves human subjects, really, which is that we rely on individuals and speech communities for our data. Whenever possible, we should use our findings to help those people if they find that they need such help. So it's sort of a reciprocity with the people without whom we wouldn't be able to do any of the work that we actually do. So that's the idea of why we do this kind of thing. In this video, we're going to start this by looking at dialectology and social policy with a couple of case studies, both of which will revolve around education. Then in a separate video, I'll look at dialects and testing, and then dialect awareness and community outreach. And then dialects in literature will be its own video, I think. But in any case, let's proceed. So the first set of case studies that we're going to look at here, all revolving around African American vernacular English in some way. And this has been a recurring site of controversy, both outside and within the African American community. So what I've got on the screen right now is a spread from a magazine called Atlanta's Black Professionals, which is sort of an anti-African American vernacular English poster. But to go back to the start, before the late 1960s, dialect differences were not reliably distinguished from pathology among speech therapists, and there wasn't really even an acknowledgement that there was such a difference to make, a distinction to make. And this was pervasive enough that as late as 1968, Barrett's felt the need to say the following in a major speech and language medical journal. So, the language of the disadvantaged child is different but not pathological. Instead of being remediated, he needs to be taught standard English. And there are various issues that one might take in the way that's phrased, but the point I'm making here is that this was news to the speech and language medicine establishment, I guess, at the time, even though to us it seems like common sense. And this is because really news about the fact that EAVE was systematic hadn't reached the wider academic community. So Labov 1969 is the first paper to reveal many of the systematic aspects of AAVE, which had earlier been perceived as language deficits of some kind, but which, as we know, turn out to be linguistic features with their own internal system in play. So next flash forward is to 1979 and the Ann Arbor Decision. This is an event in which African American children take their school to court for dialect discrimination. Ironically, the name of the school was the Martin Luther King Jr. Elementary School. And they ended up winning a landmark judgment in their favor, which set an important legal precedent in education policy. There's a short video here that I will show discussing this.
When rural Southern blacks eventually moved to the cities of the North, they brought their own kind of English with them. They're young men now, but 25 years ago, Dwayne, Asheen, and Keeley were students at this school. Situated in a prosperous, mostly white suburb of Ann Arbor, there were not many black kids at the Martin Luther King School. When they spoke, as they did at home, in African American English, their teachers simply assumed they couldn't do schoolwork.
They sort of felt like we were unteachable in a sense, I will feel. So it kind of made them go towards other students more and gave them a little bit more help than they would give us.
Can you remember some of the things that were said, teachers would say?
Actually, to be honest, the teachers really didn't even communicate with us too much. It just was sort of like in the sense that we were on our own.
Do you remember any of that? You were younger.
I was real young, but I mean, I remember enough to know that I wasn't being treated the same way as all the other kids in the class or a lot of the other kids. You know, that's the irony of it all. It's Martin Luther King School, and, you know, they haven't learned anything from Martin Luther King. Well, hopefully they learned it, but they didn't learn it back then.
3 mothers refused to accept second best for their sons. Annie, what was it that got you and other parents upset enough to bring a lawsuit against the school?
My kids was tested and was put into special ed classes, and I felt like that they were not getting educated and was not treated equally, and I felt like that shouldn't be a barrier because of a language to stop them from being educated.
Ruth Zweifler is a social worker familiar with the housing project the boys came from. Listening to Annie tell how her son and his friends were failing at school, she knew something was wrong.
There were maybe 24 poor black children in a sea of affluent white families, and they really were having a very hard time.
Ruth became convinced that the kids were being discriminated against because of their African American English.
Language is the marker for assumed attitudes, coming with an implied criticism, which is what I think a black child carries with him. We as adults, as mainstream society, as Americans, have really done bad by these little kids.
Hi, Ruth.
Hey.
How are you?
How good to see you.
Good.
Unable to make any headway with the school administrators, Ruth went to Detroit. One of the lawyers she consulted was Ken Lewis. The legal strategy they and others thrashed out led to a landmark court decision on black English.
Our job was to see if we could come up with some legal theories that made sense that we could pursue on their behalf. The initial thrust of the case was to deal with the children's poverty as the reason why they were not being educated. There is really no constitutional right not to be poor in this country, and so trying to find some constitutional provision that would help us along those lines was a futile effort. So language became a part of it, and since that language barriers seemed to impact adversely only on black youngsters, we were able to tie in the race issue.
The most significant thing that I believe was raised during that trial was that you had a federal judge acknowledge formally that African American vernacular English represented a significant linguistic barrier to academic achievement and success. He confirmed that the school district was really insensitive to the linguistic background of the vast majority of African American students within the school district.
Years later, the argument Ken Lewis used in this courthouse was raised by educators in Oakland, California. But they claimed black English, which they called Ebonics, was a separate language. That caused a national storm, and as we'll see, it's an issue school boards are still grappling with.
One of the things that I remember Judge Joyner indicating in his opinion was the need to help youngsters appreciate the difference between the language of the majority, how it would impact upon your being perceived by others. That was part of the discussion we had to wrestle with in the black English case, because we thought that the teachers were not respecting the language as it should have been.
So an important thing to point out here is that the landmark judgment that they won in their favour in that case was in an important way built on the testimony of linguists, and it set an important legal precedent in education policy within Michigan, but no higher up than that, given the way that the court system works. Now, the next sort of case study we're going to look at is the Oakland Ebonics controversy, which some of you may know about already. It's a very famous event. It's quite far in the past now. It's 24 years ago, but it's still something that gets brought up a lot in this kind of discussion. And there was a brief mention of it actually in the video that we just saw as well. So some of you may know about this a little bit already, but here are the basics anyway. So in December of 1996, the school board in Oakland, California, passed a resolution to use contrastive African-American vernacular English to standard English comparison in classrooms, with the goal of improving literacy education for AAVE-speaking students, to teach them standard English, essentially. Now, just to give you a sense of what they had in mind here, here's a picture, a little sort of clip of this methodology in action, once again from Do You Speak American, the documentary. So here we go.
The LA school system knows its minority students will need to be, in effect, bilingual. PS 100 in Watts is one of 60 schools using an experimental program called Academic English Mastery.
I need all groups to pay attention. Cloyd, I need your focus now. And Gerardo.
Daniel Russell uses a game of Jeopardy to teach his grade 5 class how to translate their home language into mainstream American.
Okay, here we go. My grandpa cooked dinner every night.
Third person singular, cooks. My grandpa cooks dinner every night.
Which linguistic feature is not in mainstream American English?
Third person singular.
Yes. Yes. And Marisol, how do you code switch this into mainstream American English?
My grandpa cooks dinner every night.
You just got 500 more points. He's funny.
He is funny.
Okay, Ariel Baron, what's the answer?
He is funny.
He is funny? Excellent translation. Here we go. We don't have nothing to do. Okay, quiet please.
We don't have nothing to do.
Oh, I'm sorry. That is not, oh wait, that is not an accurate translation in mainstream American English. So you're at minus 400. So let me roll. Let's see which team will have an opportunity to get it. I might roll you guys again. 1, 2.
Anything. We don't have anything to do.
Excellent translation.
I think perhaps the biggest misunderstanding is the idea that we are somehow teaching African American language, teaching Ebonics, if you will. We don't need to teach African American language
because they come speaking.
They already know it.
Yeah.
Our task is to help move them towards mastery of the language of school in its oral and written form, but to do that in a way where they are not devalued or where they feel denigrated in any way by virtue of their cultural and linguistic differences. Because when you begin to devalue youngsters and make them feel that who they are doesn't count, then we turn them off from education.
Last night, we baked cookies.
No, it's past tense. I got it.
Are you ready? Okay, number 1, what language is it in?
AAL.
It is an African American language. Number 2, what linguistic feature is in AAL?
Past tense marker, ED.
Past tense marker ED, that's 2. And how do you code switch it into mainstream American English?
Last night we baked cookies.
You got 500 more points. Is it too easy or I just taught you well this year?
Students in the program show significant gains in written English. Those behind it believe that unless more teachers treat home language as sympathetically, they'll condemn more generations to school failure. Language remains a formidable frontier in the legacy of slavery.
So that's what the idea was. You can see there are various really interesting things about that methodology and its effects. So one is those children are throwing around grammatical terminology of a sophistication that I don't think I myself reached until quite far in my education, which is pretty impressive. And I think the reason is that in highlighting contrast like that, it becomes easier to understand grammatical concepts. If you're able to compare two systems which are different with respect to some grammatical feature, then getting a grasp of what the features mean and what the terminology means becomes easier. And that sort of dovetails with my own experience as well in terms of my own mastery of grammatical terminology and linguistic terminology was really helped a lot by foreign language study. Like once I started studying foreign languages, it suddenly became easier to get a grasp on, say what a verb means, because they have properties in, say, French versus English which are different from each other. Anyway, very interesting methodology. Certainly seems to have some potential and success under its belt. But and this is what the 1996 resolution was about, that the Oakland School Board passed. But unfortunately, the wording of the resolution was widely misunderstood, and the result was a media firestorm. If you look at the language, and I'll show you a bit of it right now, you can kind of understand what the confusion was. Here we go. So here's some of it. African American students utilize a language described as Ebonics or African language systems, which are genetically based and not a dialect of English. And then the Board of Education officially recognizes the existence of West and Niger-Congo African language systems as the predominantly primary language of African American students. So notice here that in this particular quote, they're taking a side in the academic debate over AAVE's origin. So they're effectively endorsing a species of the substrate hypothesis out of the four hypotheses that we looked at earlier in the semester about AAVE's origins. And the terms they're using to talk about the variety come from scholars who've been keen to emphasize the African roots of AAVE features. They're taking this side in this academic debate when they really didn't need to. The other things that obviously would let doubt at people as strange and caused a lot of the misunderstandings is that they refer to AVE as a separate language from English, and also use the term genetically based in a sort of clumsy way. Now, what they meant by this was the metaphorical sense of genetic that historical linguists often use when they talk about the relationships between languages. So it's the same sort of usage that they intended as when we say, for example, that Spanish and French are genetically related, meaning they have a common ancestor language. But the way they worded it, it made it sound like they meant that African American children are somehow genetically, like biologically genetically predisposed towards a certain type of language usage, which obviously let out as racist and absurd. That's not what they meant, but obviously the phrasing didn't do them any favors. So practically all the media commentary took the resolution to mean that standard English wouldn't be taught anymore, and that African American English would be taught instead. So Reverend Jesse Jackson, for example, who's one of the foremost leaders of the civil rights movement, was one such initially. He said initially that the resolution amounted to making slang talk a second language, teaching down to students, and he characterized it as an unacceptable surrender, borderlining on disgrace. So once Jackson actually sort of changed his stance later on during the controversy, once it became clear to him that the school board were not actually proposing this, but rather that they were proposing contrastive study comparison of AAE and standard English as a method of improving standard English mastery. But because of the fact that almost all of the media commentary didn't recognise that, a lot of people got confused. You also got Maya Angelou, for example, saying the very idea that African-American language is a language separate and apart could encourage young black students not to learn Standard English. Whereas, of course, the actual methodology improves learning and fosters learning of Standard English. But this was lost in the commentary. Now, linguists got involved pretty quickly. So the resolution itself was, as I said, passed in December 96. Now, the annual meeting of the Linguistic Society of America usually takes place in early January, and so the 1997 edition of that meeting was held just weeks after the Oakland School Board passed its resolution. And John Rickford brought forward a resolution at the LSA meeting that year, which was voted backed unanimously by linguists at the conference in support of the school board. So here's some of the language from that resolution. The systematic and expressive nature of the grammar and pronunciation patterns of the African-American vernacular has been established by numerous scientific studies over the past 30 years. Characterizations of Ebonics as slang, mutant, lazy, defective, ungrammatical, or broken English are incorrect and demeaning. There is evidence from Sweden, the United States, and other countries that speakers of other varieties can be aided in their learning of the standard variety by pedagogical approaches which recognize the legitimacy of the other varieties of a language. From this perspective, the Oakland School Board's decision to recognize the vernacular of African American students in teaching them Standard English is linguistically and pedagogically sound. Now, the Oakland resolution called for federal education funding to be used to underwrite the program, and so Senate hearings had to be conducted to decide whether the funds could be used for this purpose. And linguists testified at the hearings, and ultimately the program was funded based on an amended resolution which removed some of the more controversial terminology that we saw earlier. Just here's a short clip of Bill Labov. Just 1 second. Oh, here it is. Good.
American vernacular English is becoming not less, but however, research in the years that followed found that in many of its important features, African American vernacular English is becoming not less, but more different from other dialects. Research on the language of ex-slaves showed that some of the most prominent features of the modern dialect were not present in the 19th century. It appears that the present-day form of African American English is not the inheritance of the period of slavery, but the creation of the second half of the 20th century as the result of increasing residential segregation. An important aspect of the current situation is a strong social reaction against suggestions that the home language of African American children be used in the first steps of learning to read and write. Now, the Oakland controversy is the fourth major reaction that I know of to proposals of this kind. Plans for programs to make the transition to Standard English have been misunderstood as plans to teach the children to speak African American English, or Ebonics, and to prevent them from learning Standard English. As a result, only one such program has been thoroughly tested in the schools, and even that program, though very successful in improving reading, was terminated because of objections to the use of any African American English in the classroom. At the heart of the controversy, I think there are two major points of view taken by educators. One is that any recognition of a non-standard language as a legitimate means of expression will only confuse children and reinforce their tendency to use it instead of Standard English, a point of view we've just heard. The other is that children learn most rapidly in their home language, and they can benefit in both motivation and achievement by getting a head start in learning to read and write in this way. Both of these views are honestly held and deserve a fair hearing. But until now, only the first has been tried in the American public school system extensively. The essence of the Oakland School Board resolution, as I see it, is that the first method has not succeeded and the second deserves a trial. Research on reading shows that an essential step in learning to read is the mastery of the relation of sound to spelling. As linguists, we know that for most inner-city African-American children, this relation is different and more complicated than for speakers of other dialects. We've not yet been able to apply this knowledge to large-scale programs for the teaching of reading, but we hope that with the interest aroused by the Oakland School Board resolution, this will become possible in the near future. And I've appended an article I wrote last year, published last year, called Can Reading Failure Be Reversed?, which attempts to describe this dialect in more detail and give suggestions for how that knowledge can be used.
So the upshot was that the program was funded, but there's some of the lessons to draw here. So the mainstream media in many cases ignored linguists' attempts to play a role in the conversation. So John Rickford on his website has a discussion of the whole thing that he wrote back in 1998, and he relates this information. So during the period of the controversy, the New York Times published several anti-Ebonics op-eds and summarily rejected 4 independent op-ed submissions by 4 different linguists who tried to present a different view. So Rickford submitted one himself, and he learned from other linguists that they tried the same thing but were rejected. So it seems like the Times and a number of other organs of the press weren't really interested in anything that might pour cold water on the controversy. So major TV news programs as well would solicit linguist input and conduct interviews, but then often proceed not to use any of the material. And once the wording of the resolution was changed, most of the media storm died down because many wrongly thought that the wording change meant that the policy itself had changed, but really the policy had been the same all along, and they'd misunderstood it in the first place. So what did this reveal to us? Well, it revealed deep division surrounding the status of AAVE within the country, and also it seems that a lot of the controversy stemmed from basic misunderstandings of the policy itself. Misunderstandings which were themselves rooted in misconceptions about what African American vernacular English is. And also, there was and still is widespread reluctance in the mainstream media to embrace policies which grant non-standard dialects a place in the classroom, even when this is done explicitly in order to improve the teaching of standard English. And if you're, I have on occasion tried to figure out to what extent this kind of comparative, contrastive AE standard English program is still in use, and the truth is that uptake was quite spotty. Like, it depended a lot on individual teachers whether it was picked up or not, and also now because of California Proposition 209, which was reaffirmed in court in 2012, programs of that sort, educational programs of that sort, are of now questionable legality in California. So Proposition 209 essentially forbids taking into account race in any sort of part of educational policy. And it was Proposition 209 is really at its core, it's an anti-affirmative action bill proposition, but in one of its effects is making sort of targeted education policies of this kind of questionable legality. But anyway, this will be the end of this video, and in the next video we'll take up more about dialects and testing in this arena. See you soon.